I like to put it this way, just like when I started LGBT, previously LGBT movement, but now LGB Alliance, I would stand there, rain or shine, and I'll raise the flag up high. I always bring the longest uh, flagpole and raise the flag. Because if during that parade or whatever happens, if just one person sees us and looks up to and they realize that at least we are there for them, we support them, even though we've never met and maybe we never will. I will always be there for, and we will always be there for those in need and help and or just to back them up. And I think that will keep using that as my motto and what we are keep on doing in here in Taiwan. And of course, with our just like you, with all our American and all our allies from all around the world, and we're all in this together, and uh, we'll make it through.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another LGB Alliance USA podcast. This time, we're joined with a very special guest, Nick from Taiwan, from our LGB Alliance Taiwan group. And we're really excited. This is a episode that we've been a long time coming. We've been meaning to do this talk for quite a while. So we're really excited that Nick could take the time to chat with us today. And I'm joined also with Sylvia, who was just at the protests in DC. And so, in addition to learning more about LGB Alliance Taiwan, we're going to talk about the protests and the way that the Taiwanese news reported on the protests and how different that was than the US news. So, Nick, I want to hand it over to you to tell us more about LGB Alliance Taiwan.
Hello, and I'm Nick from LGB Alliance Taiwan. We are, as its name suggests, an LGBT alliance, and created in light of the recent shift in the previously LGBT rights activist groups in Taiwan moving shifting towards gender ideology, LGBTQ, and among the largest organizations in Taiwan has openly backed trans ideology, even to support uh, underage puberty blocking. And so we realized that this is unacceptable, and we had to come together to come up with an organization for LGBT rights and back to the definition of sex and same-sex attraction. Thus, LGBT Alliance Taiwan was born. And I'm currently the co-founder with my colleagues and other allied organizations supporting LGBT rights.
That's really excellent, Nick. Can I ask which year did you notice that the shift started to happen in Taiwan as well, where it was no longer a focus on LGB or even LGBT rights, but it was more so a focus on TQIA rights?
I would say that in Taiwan, since marriage equality was passed earlier than we expected it to be, the verdict handed down by our Supreme Court Justice or our Grand Justice was back in 2017, and the associated marriage equality bill was in 2019. Right after 2019, the LGBT movement was kind of like lost. And I would say that before 2019, we had kind of like a goal, like fighting for marriage equality, so everyone must come together. So the trans part of the QIA part was not necessarily separated from the traditional classic LGB. But after 2019, just like many countries which marriage equality passed, this kind of came in the equation, and then LGB was gradually lost. And also, one thing that kind of accelerated the process was that during the early days of the COVID, like mentioned, we passed marriage equality in 2019. So during the early days of the COVID pandemic, Taiwan was doing actually better than many nations. Uh, so we're kind of uh, lived inside a bubble, and that allowed things to come in or to thrive instead of like many other countries focusing primarily on fighting the pandemic or the economic crisis that ensued. So during those years, we had actually more time for gender ideology or for the LGBTQIA movement to start and to burn.
That makes sense. I think we sort of had the situation of it being people being locked down here in this country, and a lot of the gender ideology movement happening online and in those and behind closed doors. So people, and maybe this is not, I don't know what you think, Sylvia, but it seemed like there was a lot more a push in those years as well that just we sprung out of it, and it was just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I know there was sort of a trend of men and women who were like, started the pandemic as one gender identity and then spent 2 years locked in their apartment or house and were able to transition and then come out a different, gender. That's definitely a phenomenon that happened um, here, at least. So it definitely took off in the pandemic as well.
So I want to ask, just like in the US, because our situation is also after marriage equality, it was like, oh, gay rights, that's a done deal. We're fine. Now we're going to just focus on TQIA issues. And our major organizations also abdicated responsibility. And I personally love to give them the comeuppance that they're due because they have turned on us. They have absolutely ignored LGB to prioritize TQIA. What organizations are or had been leading the fight for LGBTQ people in Taiwan up to I mean I guess even now that are problematic for you? For us in the US, it's HRC, GLAD, and CLR. There's a number of them, equality groups. There's just tons of them. Did you have that same phenomenon in Taiwan where there was a couple of big groups that then there were many smaller groups, and there's just this proliferation of groups now that are all promoting gender ideology and ignoring lesbian, gay, and bisexual issues?
I love the saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Uh, in our case, it's actually pretty much identical because the two biggest organizations that led the fight for marriage equality, or previously led the fight for gay and lesbian and bisexual rights, uh, the first being the Tongzhi Hotline. Tongzhi is the word for in Mandarin Chinese, similar to LGBTQ people. It's kind of an umbrella term nowadays. It's also it's overused. The Taiwan Tongzhi Hotline would be the go-to organization for all LGBT people, LGBTQ people, and it's called Hotline. So they receive certain funding and they run a LGBT hotline for teenagers or LGBT people to seek help. And well, that sounds like a great idea, right? It was a great idea, of course. The second being the TAPCPR. They're called the Taiwan Alliance to Promote Civil Partnership Rights. As the name suggests, at the very years ago or even decades ago, when marriage equality movement started, we thought that, or many of us at least, thought that it was impossible to pass marriage equality in the traditional way, like, oh, being 100% or at least 60 or 80% similar or the same as same rights and protection as a heterosexual marriage. So they started out as coming up with bills like many nations, like some states in the United States, as far as I know, go through the civil union path or the domestic partnership path. After it passed, the aforementioned two organizations, we realized that way too late. They turned on us all and suddenly holding seminars and even openly handing out pronoun stickers to stick on their ID cards saying, next time you go to the hospital, show them the sticker, and then the nurse or the doctor should call you in your preferred pronoun. They actually hand out, this is for real, you can all look this up. They hand out pronoun stickers for people to take for free. And where does the money come from? Of course, the donors, or partially government funded, mostly donors, average Joe, average Jane, who were previously supporting LGBT rights, but now everything changed. These are the two biggest organizations, and they actually led the fight. Say this again, led the fight for marriage equality. But now you see even puberty blocking articles start showing up. Oh, and under and a kid may decide where he or she wants to wear a skirt or not, and you see, the same tone that you see. It's the same playbook that you see showing up in their materials. Like, wait, they're supposed to fight for marriage equality, but nowadays, what's going on? And so it's pretty much the same thing.
So this truly is a global phenomenon that we're seeing in real time across the globe. Very much similar timelines as well, with these major groups realizing, oh, this is where we make money now. This is how we make money now that we've got marriage equality. Isn't that something? It's sort of shameful that this one great feat that we were able to achieve, and then sometimes in really quick fashion, as you mentioned, happening so quick in Taiwan, marriage equality, where you weren't sure it was going to happen in your lifetime, and then there it is, and now we're all onto this gender ideology.
Just to jump in, because you got my gears turning a little bit. Because it's a global phenomenon, it almost it feels, it could be purely about the money, but I can't help but feel our countries both accomplished this goal of marriage equality, where gay people seem to finally kind of fit into the fabric of the culture. And yet gay people still disrupt the culture because they are same-sex attracted. It's not a man and a woman. And gender ideology seeks to rectify that, seeks to fix that by turning gay people into straight couples. So there's a part of me, the pessimist in me, that's like, this is old school homophobia, coming back for one last hurrah. Like, you might have had marriage, like, I'll give you marriage, but we're still going to turn you straight one way or another. That's really what it feels like for me. And I think a lot of people, especially on the conservative end of the spectrum, like to say gay marriage was the slippery slope that got us here. I think no, the slippery slope was the terrible homophobia that gay people faced. That is coming back, like I said, for one last hurrah. Now that gay marriage was seemingly the final piece that would make us all fit in a cohesive puzzle in society. You can stop gender ideology from maybe being in schools or from fighting kids transitioning, but if you don't find the root cause that got us to this point, we're going to keep having these types of issues. And I don't know, that's probably something to explore in another conversation. So we'll have to have you back, Nick, for that conversation. But go on, Joss.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really fantastic point, and it's something that while we were fighting for gay marriage in the US, there were contingents of gay people that did not ever plan to get married. I personally was not a pro, like I fought for it, but it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do myself. And that's just a whole other story about the institution of marriage and contracts and, all of that. But that's a really good point though, Sylvia. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about your history as an activist in general in the gay rights movement?
I will never forget that night. Well, it's always a night, and it was at a metro station. We call it the MRT, but you may call it the subway or something. It was in Taipei. He was previously my classmate, but he is gay, and somehow that kind of got around, and he felt he was forcibly outed by his classmates, a little bullied. But on the platform, he asked me, "Hey Nick," I said, "Hey, what's up?" He said, you heard rumors of me. I said, well, stuff goes around. I don't know what you're talking about. He said, I like men. And I said, so what? I like girls and boys. So what? Right. And then that kind of began that I knew from that point on that there's a not just I can live a better life, but the compassion for people and empathy. Like I mentioned, I participated a lot in LGBT rights, and back during I think the first Trump administration, there was a movement called Women's March, and Women's March actually had a Taiwan version, and I actually joined it, and I was a part of it for many years. I personally I wasn't the Grand Marshal. It was nothing spectacular. I was the car at the front of the march, just maintaining safety distances with the traffic. But I'm glad that it hosted at least 2 or 3 Women's Day parades in Taiwan, in Taipei City. And of course, as it being at that time, there would be drag queens and gay people, lesbians, and together and celebrating women and all that jazz. So I was a women's rights activist and pushing for marriage equality, of course, as well. And I also ran for parliament during that time frame, Taiwanese parliament, as an independent. So the platform would definitely be LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and advocacy for more more trees, and so on and so forth. So I've been fighting for human rights and LGBT rights for pretty much as long as I know.
When did the shift happen for you? It's fairly recently, in terms of shifting more to focus on LGBT rights and being a part of LGB Alliance, or I guess co-founder of LGB Alliance Taiwan.
I would say when finally it's always the iceberg, when you hit the iceberg. But when you hit it, just like Titanic, usually it's way too late. It was the first lawsuit, and they knew it. There was a playbook, there was a strategy. The criteria for the changing of a sex marker was never codified into law. It was only an interpretation given by the Ministry of Interior, saying that it was previously you needed 2 medical certificates from licensed psychiatrists stating that GDGID was GID, but now gender dysphoria, as we all know, and the removal of original reproductive organs. The last criteria was removed. The last criteria was the reconstruction of the at least the appearance of the organs for the desired gender, the desired sex marker. But it was removed, so at least they had to remove their original reproductive organs. But the problem lies in that this was never a law. No bill, no nothing, because nobody was concerned about it. There was only a handful of people every year. And after transition, usually they just live a low-key life, like you and I. But they knew it, and they knew this could be challenged. They had money, they had lawyers, and they sued the household registration office in Taiwan. That is the office we go for household registration, for ID cards and everything. Sued it, saying that you are violating my rights because you wouldn't let me change my sex marker, even though I have a penis and I want to be a woman by law, a legal woman, but you're blocking my way, so I sue you. The court then made a judgment saying, not allowing this man to change his sex marker is apparently against human rights. So the case got passed. That was the beginning of everything, the actual slippery slope. So this very moment, there are at least 4 who succeeded using the same method by suing the government, suing the household office. So we have 4 self-ID, legal self-ID cases already in Taiwan.
Is it that every single person that wants to self-ID will use that same methodology of suing, or do you think it's going to they're going to end up introducing it as a law?
Of course, the end of the line, or the objective would be a law, or at least a functional bill, or at least, like I mentioned, to change the current interpretation handed down by the Ministry of Interior. But so far, the cases there, and as far as we know, there are more than one case still pending inside the court, inside the legal system. And so, like you mentioned, currently their only way is through litigation. And of course, you have to have lawyers and enough time and money to do that. And unfortunately, that's what they have at this very moment. And I wouldn't say a lot, but many of them have already succeeded.
If somebody doesn't go through the process of suing the government to get their documents changed, are there people who just will continue to use like women-only spaces regardless of whether or not their IDs match, or even, women that'll use men-only spaces regardless if their IDs match? Is transitioning something that's easily accessible in Taiwan? In the States, it's getting easier and easier for people to purchase cross-sex hormones, and there are more and more surgeons now that promote doing double mastectomies or vaginoplasty, etc.
There was never a law in Taiwan that states that there must be a men's room and a ladies' room. The law only states that the women has to have, there must be stalls reserved for women, but it didn't state that the stalls have to be in a separate room or a separate space, separate part, or separate floor or whatsoever. The men's room still remains to be the men's room, but the ladies' room will certainly become a gender-friendly toilet, because it's still by law, it's still legal. They're not against the code because they're bathroom stalls, but they're accessible for all genders. So this is a very terrible part, because they're directly invading women's single-sex spaces. But we don't exactly have that type of legislation that states that you cannot use the single-sex space of the opposite sex. One of the cases that is this is very important example is that there was an intact male who claims to be a woman, wanted to use the women's shower facility inside a public pool. It was a pool of a university, of a public university. And of course, the students and the faculty of the female users of the pool was frightened, and so they came up with a compromise stating that they spent like $50,000 to this is true. They spent like $50,000 to build a gender-friendly shower room and changing room for him, but he doesn't want to use it because, as you would imagine, it's discrimination. So he still wants to use the ladies' shower room, and I think they kind of put compartments or whatsoever in the ladies' shower room. So at the end of the day is that they go everywhere and asking for people to why can't they use the women's single-sex spaces, and then we end up spending hundreds or thousands of US dollars trying to make gender-friendly ones. But of course, to them, it's just discrimination, and to them there will be no common ground until they can open just like the famous Los Angeles case, and until they can wave their rod out in front of women. And that's what's going on. There's no law or anything to prevent them from doing it. But when you call the police will still get that men out of that space. But those are only temporary measures. In the future, this will only get worse. There are at least 6 intact male using a female ID card, which means that by law, they should be granted access to all female single-sex spaces and rights and short list, anything. And this will only get worse. How do you stand up against a legal woman? How does an actual woman stand up against a legal woman in single-sex spaces or when they're violated and so on and so forth? How do you stand up in court? How will the court decide when the case is brought to court?
Wow. That's really incredible, and I think shows the necessity of having very clear laws around single-sex spaces and very clear laws and definitions about what is a woman, what is a man, and perhaps prohibiting the changing of your sex marker on documents. You know, perhaps if someone transitions, they can have a new marker, but not one of the opposite sex, because as you've mentioned, no one actually can change their biological sex. You always remain what you were born as, even if aesthetically you look different. So that Taiwan seems to be kind of a warning for other countries that are perhaps becoming more lax. I'm not sure if you're aware, we have a congresswoman, Mace. She's trying to create a law that would prohibit any biological male, regardless of their transition status, access to women's bathrooms in single-sex spaces. What's the status or trend of transitioning children in Taiwan? Is that a phenomenon that has taken off yet? I say yet because if it hasn't, I say it's bound to take off soon. Can you tell us anything about that?
We, as in the LGBT Alliance Taiwan, we were mentioned by a high-profile, openly gay psychiatrist. He also is previously on the board of the gay and lesbian organization I mentioned. In his Facebook post, he mentioned that, oh, it's the same playbook. The conservatives will start organizations. And in one of the comments, he mentioned that, oh, and one of them has arrived in Taiwan, and it's called LGB Alliance Taiwan. We're actually flattered to be mentioned by him.
So you got labeled as a conservative rights org?
Yes. Well, as usual, you know the drill. But the point is, he actually is a physician who prescribed puberty blockers to an elementary school student years ago. So it begins, like you mentioned. The problem is that we're not a part of the Geneva Convention or the United Nations, but we do have laws in place that grants legal protection for teenagers and children. So the problem is that this protection will cause harm because we don't have access, or it's difficult for us to have access to whether or not more puberty blocker prescriptions have taken place. The other organization I mentioned that led the marriage equality movement, they are actively designing and producing curriculum for gender ideology and handing them out to schools or children. And fortunately, some of them were blocked or deterred by parents or teachers who are concerned. But as you imagine, they will try to infiltrate more schools or other ways to do it. So yes, it is spreading, and we know it's happening. That's also part of the core goal or the objective or the reason why we had to come together and form LGB Alliance Taiwan, because like you mentioned, and we all know, this is homophobia and those haunting stories that we've heard in the 70s and 80s all over again. Those castration stories. This is pretty much the same thing. And also, one thing to mention is that there was a research done a few years prior that states that in Taiwan, individuals who identify as trans over the age of 18 didn't rise significantly. It was rising, but it's slow and a steady pace. But those who identify as trans or non-binary below the age of 18 skyrocketed during the past few years. And that explains the trend. There is no trans pandemic. This is a artificial pandemic. It is due to all the social and international influences, social media, and increasing pressure among teenagers, so on and so forth. Not an actual medical situation going on.
Well, this is, I think, a good segue into what I am really super excited to talk to you about. So as I'm sure you're aware, there was a Supreme Court case hearing just last week called United States versus Skrmetti, where the Tennessee Attorney General is getting sued by the United States government and ACLU for a bill that would block and prohibit minor gender transitions. So puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgeries, all of that would be illegal to be done in the pursuit of gender affirmation in the state of Tennessee. And I went there and gave a speech talking about why LGB Alliance USA is against children transitioning, because we view it as a form of conversion therapy against children who will grow up to be gay adults, and that gay adults exhibit behaviors that often get labeled as trans, for example, gender nonconforming or wishing that they were the opposite sex. Those are normal experiences for children who grow up to be gay. And so to treat those with puberty blockers and transitioning is wrong. And so our org went there and gave a speech, and it got a lot of coverage. We made signs that said gender medicine equal conversion therapy, and we were very excited when they got featured in the Associated Press, New York Times, even CNN, like some of big name organizations, Fox News. But none of these news sources actually reported on what our sign meant, what our org was, or what we stood for, what we were fighting against. We just got labeled as anti-trans rights, which just makes me want to bang my head against the wall, because it just shows me that they're not actually listening. They might like my sign and find it thought-provoking, gender medicine equals conversion therapy, and they're excited to use that to get clicks, but then they're not going to give their readers any insight into our org or what we're fighting for, except for one news station. I had the pleasure of speaking with a Taiwanese reporter. She said, "Hi, with Taiwan News." I was like, "Great. Love to tell you about our org and what we want." And she gave me a very good interview. She held the microphone a little low, so if anyone watches the video and it says, "Sylvia, why are you standing in such an awkward position?" It's I don't know why she was holding the microphone so low, but it worked out. She still reported on what I said, and that's what matters. And I Google translated the article and was very pleasantly surprised to find that there was no smear campaign against me or LGB Alliance USA. It was purely seemingly just facts. And so I'd love to get a rough translation, or a translation perhaps, of what it says, and how you feel it was reported. Was it balanced or was it skewed?
The news agency that interviewed Sylvia is the Central News Agency, and as the name suggests, it's actually the state-owned and state-run news agency, which mainly, of course, covers domestic affairs and sometimes for international issues. But in recent years, for instance, they have English language platforms such as you would see it on their website. The CNA, the Central News Agency, the CNA, they call it the Focus Taiwan, which is pretty much a English version of the news. I'll briefly translate it. It said, in the United States, there's more than half of states that has bills or laws that bans underage transition or gender affirming care. And the Supreme Court is going through the Tennessee case, as we all know. And the part that is most important would be that when speaking of the LGBT Alliance USA, in this part, quote, the side supporting the state of Tennessee, besides the traditional conservative right-wing activists, and also includes gay rights groups. One of them is the LGBT Alliance USA. The alliance is focused on promoting gay and bisexual rights, and as claims that gay, lesbian, and bisexual have different rights and needs with the trans communities.
Can I stop you right there really quick? Because that to me is huge. The fact that they just made a distinction between LGB and TQ. Like we have been trying to get the United States media to grasp that concept, and even just people, because they always call it LGBTQ people, LGBTQ rights. And it's like those letters, like this is an alphabet soup, okay? It's homosexuals and bisexuals, and then gender people and gender identity and gender queerness, and all of that is separate. So the fact that I don't even really remember articulating that to the reporter, but I guess I did, so go me. But anyway, okay, so that's just profound in itself that they made that distinction. Please continue.
The Alliance's co-chair Sylvia said that allowing underage people to accept trans medication is similar to the conversion therapy taking place decades ago that attempts to make homosexual people straight. Sylvia then mentioned that those who are determined not to be not to fit in the gender norms of society during their childhood, if they are allowed to grow up naturally during adolescence, they may turn out to be gay or lesbians, and they'll learn to accept and like their own bodies. If their adolescence and puberty are affected, if they receive trans medicine or gender affirming care to fit the gender norms of society, they will also cause negative impact to them. For instance, to feel ashamed or isolated, or to develop a gender dysphoria.
Okay, so right there, that's interesting to me. Essentially, the article is saying that I said that kids who are determined to be different, or kids that are different, they break sex stereotypes, will at times grow up to be gay adults and learn to be happy with their body. Yes, I said that. And then the next part says that kids who choose to transition, or kids that get transitioned, might develop shame or isolation and gender dysphoria. Is that kind of what the article was saying there?
It says if their adolescence or puberty is influenced through trans medicine in order to fit the the gender norms in society, it would cause
Okay.
negative
So I think
effects.
there was something lost in translation there, because what I actually remember saying is that kids who are gender nonconforming, so like a tomboy or a boy who's more feminine, right? They might experience feelings of shame or isolation and might even develop gender dysphoria, which would then cause them to go seek out gender affirming care so that they might fit into society and no longer feel that isolation or shame. But it sounds like she misunderstood my meaning, which is fair. It was loud, and things can get lost in translation. However, it is worth noting that the data that we have does seem to indicate that gender transition in minors doesn't actually help. One particular study, was it a Dutch study, Joss? Help me remember. Was a small sample size group, but found that 85% of kids just naturally grow out of their gender dysphoria, but that 100% of kids that get put on puberty blockers go on to transition and grow on to continue transitioning, and they do not resolve their gender dysphoria. So in a way, the article was right that pursuing gender medicine as a child leads to more gender dysphoria, leads to more discomfort with your natural sex that you were born as. So even with the mistranslation, there's still some accuracy, I would say, in what was reported. So I don't know what that is a testament to, perhaps just the nuance and complexity of this subject. But yeah, it's very interesting. And now I'm a little afraid to ask this, but was there anything in the article that was like, and Sylvia is therefore a total bigot and hates all people that aren't just like her? Was there anything like that? Because that seems like something that, I don't know, the New York Times might post, or the Associated Press, who called me an anti-trans rights activist. Or against an activist against trans rights was their phrase, which I'm still upset about. So was there any sort of slander like that, or misrepresentation, or did they stick just to what the facts are?
I would say they stick to what the facts are. And after your part,
Concept. Sorry, continue.
it would be Chris, the gay, Chris's statement or his speech, and then after this would be Marjorie Taylor Greene, and of course they had to mention this, that she's a Republican conservative from Georgia. The 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 reason I mentioned that from state of Georgia is because that this article is written more like listing facts, and then in conclusion it mentioned how many uh, uh, justices are there, and how many conservative justices and how many liberal justices, and then so on and so forth. So to me it's more like what a government news agency would write, as in listing writing facts. But as you would obviously spot that interviewing you and then writing out the full name of the alliance is something that I really didn't anticipate to see when this article was sent to me. It was this morning or yesterday, I think.
It was very exciting and refreshing, truthfully, to just finally feel like our voice is being heard, even if it's across the world in a small island called Taiwan. Like, at least somebody knows what we are trying to advocate for, and that we want to protect kids, and we want what's best for kids, particularly those who are gender nonconforming and feeling pain. We want to help them in the best way possible, and just feel that this gender medicine is just, I would say, snake oil, but is worse than that, because it doesn't just not work, it causes a lot of harm. So we have something called NPR, National Public Radio.
Yes.
But I would say that they tend to also have a bias. So what is it about Focus Taiwan, or you called it the CNA?
Yes.
What is it about that network that allows them to remain objective? Is it, that where their funding comes from? Like, do they get big donors from people, or is it, all just from taxes, or, why is that news station so different than the ones in the United States, in your opinion?
This is where the most interesting part for me tonight, and for you this early morning interview would be about. The CNA is rarely objective. As a matter of fact, being a government news outlet means that it is basically kind of like Taiwan is a presidential system, which is similar to the United States. Instead, well, you have the Senate but you send in the House, but we don't. We are a single chamber system. But we are also a presidential system, which pretty much means that anyone who gets elected president and his party would rule probably everything, all the way from the presidential office to how everything is run. And so CNA traditionally is basically kind of like the press office for the government. What I was going through this with my colleagues at LGB Alliance in Taiwan, and we believe also the observations we've seen is that there is a backlash coming on gender ideology, and people are not that stupid. Women are fighting back, and the tide is turning all around the world. And so sooner or later, the government and the government agencies have to have less biased or news from both sides of the aisle. What amazes me and surprises us is that the first article that this actually happened was about youth. So, like I mentioned, it looks like, oh, that's kind of an objective article, or are all there articles like this? Well, as a matter of fact, Taiwan has to remain in a nice relationship with the United States, but in issues like this, usually, since gender ideology is also our government's agenda, so usually, in recent years, CNA would lean left, but this article didn't. So that is what's so different about this. And
wow, that's pretty incredible. That's a lot for me to take in, like, because I was all ready just to be like, yeah, so your news cycle does it right and ours gets it wrong, but you're saying no, they also can have bias, but this was this was an exception. I'm thrilled to be part of the exception, and I hope to see more nuance for sure. And I wonder if perhaps it's because they're reporting on a foreign country that they maybe are allowed to kind of give more of a wider lens about what's happening, because maybe there's less of a chance that there will be significant backlash, because it's like, well, this isn't at home, this is way over there. So we're just reporting, we're not condoning what this LGB Alliance USA is saying, but we are just telling you, maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. It's do you feel that the tide is, like you said, turning and we'll see more of this sort of coverage? Or do you think that this is just a one-time thing?
I would be, I would actually be optimistic on this, since this is not just, oh, there's also backlash from, of course, we have from trans rights activists, and also there's people supporting the state of Tennessee, period. But this is an interview and writing out the organization and what you said. Well, maybe there's something lost in translation, but that's more than that's basically more than a paragraph of what you said or related to your organization over there, and it's right in front of it's at Washington D.C., right? So there's definitely a significance in it, and as I mentioned, it's a government news agency, so everything that they write has to go through the editor's room and on the editor's table.
I have to ask, because it goes through the editing room, and I was asked about what my opinion is on the incoming administration. And LGB Alliance USA is a nonpartisan organization. And I made that clear when I gave my answer, but that I said USA politics is, you never really know what you're going to get. It's kind of a wild card situation, but so long as our democracy remains intact and we have the right to freedom of speech, everything will be okay. And I'm curious if they reported that, or if they didn't, or maybe it just wasn't relevant to the article. I'm curious why they asked me that question, if they chose not to give that, were they just curious about, was it off the record? Like yeah, I'm curious about that, because I thought I gave a very good answer and I was excited to read that. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on that, if you can say?
Well, we also enjoy free speech on this side of the Pacific Ocean, so I think I can share my opinions, more or less opinion on that. Like you mentioned earlier, like United States is, we're close, but we're not that close. It's still 10,000 miles away. But as the reporters would show up, they definitely would ask questions related to the incoming administration, especially for tiny countries. We're less than we're less than the size of Lake Superior. That we're tiny. Are we not really that small? I think we are at least less than the lakes. So it's such a tiny island with 23 million people packed on this tiny island. We are easily influenced by any changes of administration, whether it's Japan, China, the China situation, and of course incoming. We call it Trump 2.0. Yeah, they definitely ask, and also this would be great if they want to dive into it, for example, in an editorial for the incoming administration, or the reporter, him or herself. Then they definitely ask, and also it's give and take. It's also a buffer for them to, if they need to change the tone of this article. However, they took a very, very mild and objective approach, because they could easily write it like, see, Trump's coming in, so conservatives is coming in hot, like that. They could easily take that approach, and it would work even from a government news agency perspective, because it's true, because conservatives are ramping up their big guns for sure. Whether it will happen or what the influences are, it's still yet to be seen, but that would still work on the article. But however, mentioned that this very article is kind of an outlier. So that is why I think that they would ask, and what from Taiwan, as we're such a tiny island, they would definitely be concerned or wanted to gather more about this when we're reporting.
Is there a way for us to get them to talk to you and your organization? Because, if they were willing to report on LGB Alliance USA, I have to imagine that they would be thrilled to find out there's an LGB Alliance Taiwan. I just feel like, have they reached out to you at all, or are you still somewhat underground and unknown?
Coming to think of it, on that very Chinese article on that page, uh, the very the main image for the article, it's first it said, oh, trans rights are rights, and then the other party says, stop transing gay kids. But the point is, there are women holding a sign that says Women's Declaration USA, and you can clearly see the link and the logo of Women's Declaration USA. So that makes me think that this article, or the reporter, kind of wanted to play it safe, or to try to get exposure of the other voices, the other side, the ones supporting the ban. And we're not necessarily underground, but we're not 501 NGO registered yet. We're still gathering our and it's tough because there's harassment and everything.
It's a process. We know all about that.
But I wouldn't be very worried or really want to make contact with the reporter, because let the article kind of run for a while. Like I mentioned, the most important part of your organization, or what we are doing, is there, and it's a government news agency article. In a sense, it's kind of like having Taiwanese government like endorsing what the LGB Alliance is. It's kind of right.
We need to go to Taiwan, Joss. I think we found our people.
So in a sense, as this article gets out, and people realize LGBT Alliance is not about conservatives against religious zealous people against human rights, and so on and so forth, and then LGBT Alliance Taiwan show up, would be a lot better or appropriate for it. And but at the same time, we're always allies and fight together, and trying to keep the ban and spread expanding the ban to other states, or like you mentioned, as a cautionary tale to other countries that hopefully they haven't started, and we can help them out.
I learned a lot from this experience at the Supreme Court, and one of the things that I learned is being how to prepare for press. And I wish that I had name dropped LGB Alliance Taiwan. I think speaking to a Taiwan reporter was the last thing I thought was going to happen. But in the future, having some sort of tagline or logline, whatever it's called, saying, we're LGB Alliance USA. There are LGB alliances across the world. Your country might have an LGB alliance. You should look into it, sort of thing. So that in the future, no matter what country news agency I'm speaking to, the people who then read that article or watch that video will be like, oh, LGB Alliance USA, maybe there's LGB Alliance Taiwan, or maybe there's LGB Alliance, whatever country. That would be something that I would like to do differently in the future. And I absolutely agree with what you said about how you think that the reporter kind of wants this perspective to get out there. And that's kind of how I feel about particularly the Associated Press, that once again called me against trans rights. But the picture that they posted said, "Moms against mastectomies for minors, stop selling lies with the trans flag, puberty blockers or gender medicine equals conversion therapy, and stop transing gay kids." Those 4 signs were like on a banner of the Associated Press. And even though the caption for the photo was BS, the people looking at that picture, certainly if they have a brain, are like, wait, what do all these signs mean? And that you see the logo LGBT Alliance USA, you see WDI, you see all of these things. So part of me is like, some intern or some photographer that was there was like, if I can just get this photo out, whatever bias my paper has, this photo speaks 1,000 words or speaks approximately 25, however many the signs, however many words were on the signs, but it sends the message, right? So that's a win. And as the saying goes, a win is a win. And we're only going to get stronger with our messaging and stronger with our way of getting our voices out there moving forward. And I'm just so thrilled that Taiwan News covered us and got our name out there and got our message out there in a objective way. And I had no idea it was the government agency. I mean, that's huge. So thank you so much for translating it for us. I'm ashamed to say I only speak 1 language fluently, so we appreciate your intelligence in this respect, to be able to understand multiple languages and help us bridge into other countries, because that's going to be important when combating this movement of gender identity, is to be able to work together regardless of language barriers, regardless of cultural differences, but just to say, you know what, the madness stops here. So thank you so much for your help in accomplishing that goal. It would not be possible without you. So
Yeah, and thank you, Nick, for taking the time to talk with us today and share your story about LGB Alliance Taiwan, your history as an activist, for your help with the article. And I think, what we've talked about today is like a good place to sort of tie it all together, is that we are an international body. We're all working on the same goals, and we're seeing the same unfortunate shift in the LGB rights movement skew towards gender ideology, and it's having a harmful impact on all of our global communities. So we're all here starting small organizations, trying to push back and do what's right for LGBT people, to rebuild LGBT community, and to focus on LGBT rights and our very unique interests as the same-sex oriented community once again. So I'm really grateful that you have this organization in Taiwan, and yeah, to all the other international alliances as well. Like they're all of, like you mentioned, Sylvia, they're all around the world. So there may be an LGBT alliance in your country. Certainly, if there isn't one, you can start one, because we all just said we need this and we did it. So you can too. So thank you, Nick. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Thank you so much for having me here. And like Sylvia said, that check out if your country or a certain country has a LGBT alliance. If not, you might consider starting one. It's that they will be tough, but it's rewarding. And one thing to add, during the Pride Parade, because Taiwan we are in line with other Western countries, so LGBT Alliance LGBT Alliance is labeled as a hate organization in Taiwan, and not us, just the whole concept. But I was determined, so I made the flag and I wore the T-shirt and I went to the Pride Parade. People told me not to. I said no, not to worry. I won't start fights. Just a precaution. We had body cameras just to prevent any conflicts. But I like to put it this way. Just like when I started LGBT, previously LGBT movement, but now LGB Alliance, I would stand there, rain or shine, and I'll raise the flag up high. I'll always bring the longest flagpole and raise the flag. Because if during that parade or whatever happens, if just one person sees us and looks up here and they realize that at least we are there for them, we support them, even though we've never met and maybe we never will, I will always be there for, and we will always be there for those in need and help, and or just to back them up. And I think that will keep using that as my motto and what we are keep on doing here in Taiwan. And of course, with our, just like you, with all our American and all our allies from all around the world, and we're all in this together, and we'll make it through.
I love it. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you got me having a cry lump in my chest. So beautifully said. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Nick, and for all your wise words. And yeah, I'm really excited about the future of our groups as well, and really grateful that we get to work together. Thanks everyone for joining us for another LGBT Alliance USA podcast. Again, we're really grateful for Nick joining us tonight from LGBT Alliance Taiwan, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.